What if I told you that one of WWE's most beloved characters almost never happened? In 1984, a 300-pound former basketball player from Kentucky was discovered at a gym and transformed into wrestling gold. James Morris had worked tobacco farms and was an athlete looking for his next opportunity. With prior wrestling experience under different personas, he caught WWF's attention and became Hillbilly Jim, appearing at WrestleMania alongside celebrities like Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper. Today we're diving into how a Kentucky farm boy became one of wrestling's most authentic characters and why his story represents something wrestling lost forever. James Morris was born and raised near Mud Lick in Monroe County, Kentucky, a short drive from Bowling Green, where tobacco farming defined everything. This wasn't some romantic small-town upbringing you see in movies. The Morris family knew dirt poor firsthand, and hard work wasn't optional if you wanted to eat. The tobacco farming community where Morris grew up was tough as nails. Families worked from sunrise to sunset just to make ends meet. Morris learned early that the crops needed tending, and that meant everyone pitched in. His hands were calloused before he hit his teenage years, and his back ached from bending over plants all day long. Money was tight in the Morris household, the kind of tight where you wear the same clothes until they fall apart and hope the old truck starts one more time. Here's where things get interesting though. All that back-breaking farm work was building something special. Morris wasn't just getting stronger from the physical labor, he was growing into a legitimate giant. By high school, he stood 6 feet 7 inches and weighed over 300 pounds. This wasn't gym muscle or protein powder gains. This was raw farm strength built from years of lifting hay bales and wrestling with livestock before he ever touched a proper weight. Basketball became his way out of the tobacco fields, at least temporarily. His size made him a natural fit for the high school team, and he was actually pretty good at it. The gym became his escape from the harsh reality of rural poverty. When he wasn't working the fields, he was shooting hoops or lifting weights. Weightlifting turned into a real passion for Morris. The local high school had basic equipment, nothing fancy, but Morris made the most of it. He'd spend hours in that cramped weight room, building on the foundation that farm work had already established. Other kids saw weightlifting as a way to look good. Morris saw it as preparation for whatever came next. Problem was, Morris didn't really know what came next. College basketball wasn't realistic given his family's financial situation. The NBA wasn't calling. Staying on the tobacco farm meant a lifetime of the same back-breaking work that had defined his childhood. Morris needed options, but options were pretty limited for a poor kid from rural Kentucky, even one who happened to be built like a brick house. That's when Nashville started calling his name. Music City had opportunities that Mud Lick simply couldn't offer. Morris made the decision to leave Kentucky behind and try his luck in Tennessee. Nashville meant nightclubs, and nightclubs meant they needed security. Big security. Morris's imposing frame made him perfect for bouncer work. Here was something he could do that actually paid decent money. Working Nashville nightclubs wasn't glamorous, but it beat tobacco farming. Morris found himself breaking up fights, checking IDs, and keeping drunk customers in line. His size meant most troublemakers took one look at him and decided to behave. The ones who didn't learn quickly that Morris wasn't just tall, he was strong as an ox, and had years of hard labor behind every muscle. Night after night, Morris worked the club scene. He'd stand at doors, patrol dance floors, and escort rowdy customers outside. It was honest work, but it wasn't leading anywhere special. Morris was stuck in another dead-end job, just with better hours than tobacco farming. He had the physical tools to succeed at something bigger, but what exactly that something might be remained unclear. The club work did give Morris confidence around people, though. He learned how to read situations, how to diffuse tension, and how to use his presence without always resorting to force. These social skills would prove more valuable than he realized. Morris was developing the personality to match his impressive physical gifts, setting the stage for something much bigger than nightclub security work. What Morris didn't know was that his bouncer job would soon put him in the right place at exactly the right time. Wrestling connections were about to change everything, but first he needed someone to notice what that farm strength and natural presence could become in the right hands. That someone turned out to be Bruce Swayze, a local wrestling promoter who knew talent when he saw it. While Morris was working his nightclub bouncer gigs in Nashville, he kept up his workout routine back home in Bowling Green. The high school gym where he'd played basketball became his regular training spot. Morris would drive back to Kentucky and hit those familiar weights, keeping himself in shape between club shifts. The Bowling Green High School gym wasn't much to look at. Basic equipment, concrete floors, and that musty smell every old gym has. But for Morris, it was home. He knew every barbell and dumbbell in that place. As a former all-state basketball player, Morris still had connections at the school. The coaches let him work out there when he was in town. It beat paying for some fancy Nashville gym membership he couldn't really afford anyway. Morris was going through his usual routine when Swayze walked into that gym. Swayze had been around the Kentucky wrestling scene for years and recognized raw potential when it was staring him in the face. Here's this massive guy, 6'7" and over 300 pounds, moving weight around like it was nothing. Swayze had promoted enough wrestlers to know Morris had something special. Keep in mind, Morris wasn't some wrestling fan dreaming of stardom. He was just a big guy staying in shape, but Swayze saw something more. He approached Morris after the workout and started talking about wrestling opportunities. Morris had never seriously considered professional wrestling as a career option. Basketball was his sport, and that ship had sailed. But Swayze made wrestling sound like it might actually pay the bills. So here's what happened next. Swayze convinced Morris to give wrestling a try, and Morris started training with some local wrestlers to learn the basics. His size and natural athleticism translated pretty well to the wrestling ring. Morris wasn't going to win any technical wrestling awards, but he had presence. People noticed when he walked into a room, and that's worth something in the wrestling business. Morris began working small shows around Kentucky and Tennessee, gaining valuable ring experience. In Memphis, Morris wrestled as Harley Davidson, playing up a biker gimmick to learn how to work with different opponents and connect with audiences. The character didn't really stick, but Morris was developing his own personality as a performer. Word about this big Kentucky wrestler started making its way around wrestling circles. Promoters talked to each other, and a 6'7" guy who could actually work was worth talking about. Morris was building a reputation as a reliable performer who showed up on time and gave an honest effort every night. That's when Pat Patterson entered the picture. Patterson was WWF's top talent scout, and he watched Morris work one night in Nashville. What he saw impressed him enough to make a phone call. Pat Patterson called Morris to come up to WWF the next week. The meeting between Morris and Vince McMahon changed everything. McMahon saw the same potential that Swayze had spotted in that Bowling Green gym. But he had something bigger in mind than regional wrestling shows. He wanted to create a character that would capture Morris's genuine Kentucky background and make it work for national television audiences. That's when Hillbilly Jim from Mudlick, Kentucky was born. McMahon knew that Morris's authentic rural background was his greatest asset. Instead of creating some fake persona, they decided to build around Morris's real story. The character would be Morris himself, just amplified for television. McMahon's masterstroke was the way he introduced this new character to WWF audiences. The company framed Morris as being picked from the crowd and trained by Hulk Hogan. And Hogan actually worked with him at his Clearwater Beach gym and vouched for him inside the company. This gave Morris instant credibility with both fans and the wrestling roster. The training vignettes with Hogan would introduce Morris to national television audiences, but the real genius was still to come. Instead of manufacturing another fake wrestling character, McMahon and Morris were about to do something completely different. McMahon and Morris built the character around what was already there. While other wrestlers got handed costumes and backstories that had nothing to do with who they really were, Morris just stayed himself. The WWF in the mid-1980s was full of manufactured characters, evil foreigners, comic book superheroes, and over-the-top villains. Morris was different, though. When McMahon met with him, they didn't need to invent some wild character from scratch. Here's a guy who actually grew up dirt poor on a Kentucky farm. He really did work tobacco fields. He genuinely talked with that country accent and had those rural mannerisms. McMahon realized they had lightning in a bottle if they could capture Morris's authentic personality on television. The question was whether a real Kentucky farm boy could work in the increasingly theatrical WWF. McMahon decided to take a chance on authenticity. Instead of a studio set promo, the company sent cameras to his farm, real people, not actors, which made Hillbilly Jim feel like a human being on TV. The WWF filmed vignettes at his Kentucky home, showing real family members and his pet pig as part of the on-screen presentation. That authenticity separated him from other manufactured characters. The vignettes they filmed were unlike anything wrestling fans had seen before. Morris wasn't standing in front of some fake backdrop talking about his character. He was walking around his actual property, introducing his real family members, and just being himself. The camera followed him as he did genuine farm chores and interacted with his pets. Morris had a pig named Elmer that became part of these segments, and that pig wasn't some trained animal actor. It was just Morris's actual pet pig. These family interactions broke completely new ground in wrestling character development. Most wrestlers talked about their backgrounds but never showed them. Morris was letting fans into his real life. His relatives weren't actors reading scripts. They were his actual family members being themselves on camera. The conversations felt natural because they were natural. Framing him as a Hogan protege, complete with Clearwater Beach training footage, gave the authentic farm vignettes a mainstream stamp of approval. The character evolution happened organically too. The name Hillbilly Jim evolved in-house and matched Jim's real-life roots, rather than being a completely artificial creation. Nobody had to manufacture this identity because Morris already lived it. Even Morris's look came from his real background instead of WWF's costume department. Those overalls, the beard, and his natural mannerisms were authentic elements that just worked perfectly for television. The authentic approach became Morris's greatest strength in wrestling's increasingly fake world. When other wrestlers were trying to remember their character's backstory and motivation, Morris just had to be himself. When other performers were practicing their catchphrases and rehearsing their interviews, Morris could just talk naturally about his actual experiences growing up in Kentucky. Fans responded to that authenticity immediately. They could tell Morris wasn't putting on an act like most wrestling characters. His stories about farm life and rural Kentucky weren't scripted material designed to get sympathy. These were real experiences from Morris's actual childhood. The genuine emotion came through because Morris was talking about things that had actually happened to him. Wrestling fans are pretty good at spotting phonies, but they couldn't find anything fake about Morris. His accent was real. His mannerisms were natural. His stories checked out because they were true. Morris proved that being genuine could be more powerful than any manufactured character the creative team could dream up. The WWF had stumbled onto something special with Morris's authentic approach. They'd found a way to make reality more compelling than fantasy in a business built on make-believe. Morris had the character down perfectly, and Hogan's endorsement gave him credibility with both fans and wrestlers. But having an authentic character was only half the battle. Now Morris needed to prove he could perform when it mattered most, in front of the toughest crowds in wrestling. Madison Square Garden in early 1985 was where Morris would face his biggest test yet. The Garden wasn't just another wrestling venue. This was where careers were made or broken. The crowd there had seen everything and didn't give anyone a free pass just for showing up. Morris made his Garden debut against Rene Goulet, then posted a major singles win on February 18, 1985 at the War to settle the score. Keep in mind, Morris had only been wrestling professionally for a short time. He'd worked some regional shows and learned the basics, but Madison Square Garden was a completely different animal. The lights were brighter, the crowd was louder, and everyone backstage was watching to see if this new Kentucky guy could handle the pressure. One bad performance at MSG could end a wrestling career before it really got started. The Garden matches went well enough to prove Morris belonged on that stage. He didn't set the world on fire, but he looked comfortable out there and got the crowd behind him. More importantly, Morris showed he could handle the atmosphere without getting overwhelmed. That success opened doors for bigger opportunities in the months ahead. Those bigger opportunities came in the form of Roddy Piper's talk show segment, called Piper's Pit. Piper was the master heel of that era, and his interview segment was appointment television for wrestling fans. Getting invited on Piper's Pit meant you were being taken seriously by WWF management. It also meant you better be ready to verbally spar with one of the sharpest talkers in the business. Morris held his own during those Piper's Pit appearances. While other wrestlers got flustered by Piper's attacks, Morris stayed calm and just responded naturally. His authentic Kentucky personality actually worked really well against Piper's over-the-top heel antics. Morris didn't try to out-talk Piper or match his intensity. He just stayed true to his character and let Piper do most of the heavy lifting. He was brought into the Hogan-Piper storyline as a sympathetic Hogan ally, a role that got him on Piper's Pit and onto MTV's War to settle the score, raising his mainstream profile. This wasn't some throwaway feud. This was the main event program that was driving the entire company. Having Morris involved meant he was seen as someone who could contribute to their biggest storylines without dragging them down. Things really picked up when MTV got involved with wrestling. The War to Settle the Score special brought wrestling to mainstream television in ways it had never been before. Morris found himself part of this crossover between wrestling and popular culture, and it put him in front of mainstream music television audiences, not just wrestling fans. Here's a guy who'd been working tobacco farms just a few years earlier, and now he was appearing on MTV alongside rock stars and celebrities. Morris's natural charm worked perfectly for this celebrity crossover appeal. He wasn't trying to impress anyone or act like something he wasn't. When celebrities met Morris, they were getting the real deal, a genuine Kentucky farm boy who happened to be a professional wrestler. That authenticity made him more interesting to outsiders than wrestlers who were obviously playing characters. The whole thing built up to his WrestleMania appearances, starting with WrestleMania 2, where he competed in a battle royal, and his high-visibility role at WrestleMania 3, teaming with Little Beaver and Haiti Kid against King Kong Bundy, Little Tokyo, and Lord Littlebrook. Morris fit right in with that celebrity atmosphere because he wasn't intimidated by famous people. Celebrities like Cyndi Lauper and Mr. T took to him because he just acted like himself, which produced natural, unscripted moments that TV liked. He talked to them the same way he talked to everyone else, just being himself without putting on any airs. That natural personality made him valuable for these celebrity interactions. Morris could represent wrestling to mainstream audiences without coming across as fake or over the top. Morris had proven he could handle the biggest stages wrestling had to offer. The kid from Mud Lick, Kentucky had made it all the way to major wrestling events and mainstream television. Morris belonged there not because he was the best wrestler, but because his authentic personality connected with people in ways that scripted characters couldn't. The success convinced WWF management that they had something special with the Hillbilly Jim character. Morris had shown he could work with celebrities, handle big matches, and connect with audiences on wrestling's biggest stages. That success would soon lead WWF to make some decisions about expanding Morris's character that nobody saw coming. After Morris severely injured his knee on February 25, 1985, WWF introduced Uncle Elmer and later Cousin Junior and Cousin Luke so Jim could manage them during recovery. Morris had found his groove as Hillbilly Jim by that point. The character was connecting with audiences, he was getting decent crowd reactions, and WWF seemed happy with what he brought to the table. But the injury forced them to find ways to keep the character visible while Morris healed up. WWF's decision to expand Hillbilly Jim's character by adding family members made sense on paper given the circumstances. If one hillbilly was getting over with crowds, wouldn't a whole family of them be even better? The thinking was that Morris could become the leader of a hillbilly faction that would give WWF more storyline options while he recovered. Plus, it would let them bring in other big guys and give them instant credibility by association with Morris's established character. The risk here was pretty obvious, though. Morris's success came from his authentic personality and genuine Kentucky background. Adding fake family members could dilute what made the character special in the first place. Morris worked because he was real, his stories were true, his personality was natural, and fans could tell he wasn't putting on an act. Bringing in wrestlers to play his relatives meant introducing artificial elements to something that succeeded because it was genuine. Uncle Elmer was the first addition to the Hillbilly family in 1985. Stan Frazier was a big guy who got repackaged as Morris's uncle from Kentucky. Frazier was a decent enough wrestler, but he didn't have Morris's natural charisma or authentic background. Elmer was playing a character while Morris was just being himself. That difference showed up pretty quickly when they appeared together on television. The infamous Saturday night's main event wedding between Uncle Elmer and Joyce Stasco became one of wrestling's most bizarre ceremonies. WWF decided to have Elmer get married on national television in what was supposed to be a heartwarming moment for the Hillbilly family. The wedding took place in the ring with Morris serving as best man. The on-air wedding, done straight, no big swerve, divided audiences and showed the gimmick slipping into broad cartoon territory. So here's what made this wedding so strange. Wrestling weddings are usually disasters that end with someone getting attacked or the bride running off with another wrestler. But Elmer's wedding was played completely straight. They actually went through with the ceremony without any major interruptions or heel interference. Joyce Stasco really married Stan Frazier on live television in front of millions of people. The family kept growing after Elmer's wedding. Cousin Junior and Cousin Luke joined the faction to form a full Hillbilly family unit. Now Morris had 3 relatives backing him up in matches and storylines. The act moved further away from Jim's authentic core, with comic entrances like dancing to Don't Go Messin' with a Country Boy and increasingly outlandish family members. Their feuds with teams like The Body Shop showed how the family unit changed Morris's dynamics as a performer. Instead of being a solo act who succeeded on his own merits, Morris became the leader of a group. The matches became more about the Hillbilly family versus their opponents, rather than focusing on Morris's individual personality and wrestling ability. Keep in mind, Morris was still the star of this whole thing. He had the most natural charisma and the authentic background that made the character work. But now he had to share television time with wrestlers who were obviously playing roles. The contrast between Morris's genuine personality and his relatives' manufactured hillbilly acts was pretty noticeable to anyone paying attention. The expansion definitely brought more attention to the hillbilly characters. They got more television time, more storyline opportunities, and became a more prominent part of WWF programming. But something was lost in the process. Morris's authentic simplicity got buried under all the family drama and group dynamics. The thing that made him special, his genuine Kentucky farm boy personality, became just one part of a larger, more artificial presentation. That expansion kept him visible during his recovery, but also planted the seeds that would later limit him. Morris was hitting his stride as a singles wrestler by this point. The family expansion experiment had run its course, and he was back to focusing on his individual career. His ring work was getting better with each match. Morris had always been limited technically, but he was learning how to use his size more effectively and how to tell better stories in the ring. He had solid programs against giants like One Man Gang and frequently worked as the reliable babyface who could get consistent crowd reactions. The Gang was one of WWF's top monsters at the time, a legitimate 450-pound powerhouse who could make other wrestlers look small. Morris held his own in those matches, though. He proved he could hang with top talent and deliver entertaining matches against quality opponents. The crowds were into these David versus Goliath type battles, with Morris playing the sympathetic underdog despite his own impressive size. Morris was becoming WWF's most reliable babyface during this period. He could work anywhere in the country and get consistent crowd reactions. Fans genuinely liked the guy, and it showed in how they responded to his matches. Morris didn't need elaborate storylines or special stipulations to get people invested. He just had to be himself, and audiences connected with that authenticity. Keep in mind, Morris was filling an important role for WWF at this time. He was a dependable, sympathetic opponent who could make heels look dangerous, yet still walk out with dignity, a rare, useful trait for the territory to national transition era. Morris was the kind of performer who could make other wrestlers look good while staying over with the crowd himself. He'd put heels over in defeat, but still come out looking strong. That's a valuable skill in professional wrestling, and Morris had mastered it. So here's where things get interesting. WWF tried a short-lived heel experiment in 1987 to 88, aligning Jim with Slick. The thinking was that Morris had such a strong connection with audiences that maybe he could generate real heat by turning on them. It seemed worth trying, especially since Morris had shown he could work with top talent. The heel-turn experiment involved aligning Morris with manager Slick. This was a complete character reversal from everything Morris had been up to that point. Slick was a smooth-talking manager who represented everything opposite from Morris's rural Kentucky values. The pairing was designed to show Morris abandoning his country roots for big city corruption. Morris started dressing differently and acting like he was too good for his hillbilly background, but fans weren't buying it. At all, the heel turn felt completely artificial because it went against everything that made Morris special as a performer. His authenticity was his greatest asset, and the heel character required him to be fake. Morris was trying to convince people he was someone he clearly wasn't, and audiences could tell he was uncomfortable with the whole thing. The problem was that Morris's genuine personality couldn't be turned off and on like a switch. When he tried to act arrogant or dismissive of fans, it came across as awkward rather than convincing. Morris had spent years building trust with audiences by being authentic. Asking them to suddenly believe he was a different person entirely was asking too much. Morris's natural kindness kept showing through even when he was supposed to be playing a villain. He'd catch himself being too nice to fans or showing too much respect for his opponents. The heel character required a meanness that Morris simply didn't possess. Wrestling fans could see that Morris was acting out of character rather than revealing a hidden side of his personality. The experiment failed pretty quickly. WWF realized they had made a mistake trying to change what worked about Morris's character. The heel turn lasted only a few months before they pivoted him back to babyface status. Morris seemed relieved to return to being the good guy Kentucky farm boy that audiences had connected with from the beginning. The failed heel turn ultimately reinforced that his authentic, good-natured persona was his real asset. You couldn't fake authenticity in reverse. Morris worked because he was really the person he portrayed on television. Trying to make him play someone completely different exposed the artificiality of the wrestling business in ways that hurt rather than helped his character. The quick return to babyface status got Morris back on track, but the wrestling industry was evolving rapidly around him. By the late 1980s, WWF was prioritizing younger, more athletic performers, and Hillbilly Jim's power-based, character-driven style fit the earlier era less well. The company that had embraced his authentic farm boy character was now chasing a younger demographic that wanted high-flying action and athletic performers who could do things in the ring that seemed impossible. Morris's traditional wrestling style wasn't keeping up with these changes. He was a big guy who used his size effectively and told good stories, but he wasn't doing Hurricane Ranas or diving off the top rope. The new stars coming into WWF were smaller, faster, and more athletic than the previous generation. Guys who could move like gymnasts and perform aerial maneuvers that made crowds gasp. Morris was built for power wrestling, not acrobatics. Keep in mind, this wasn't really Morris's fault. The business had shifted underneath him while he was just doing what he'd always done. Morris was still getting decent crowd reactions and putting on solid matches. But decent wasn't cutting it anymore in WWF's new direction. Management wanted performers who could wow audiences with athletic ability on top of having good personalities. He moved from TV featured spots to opening matches and special appearance roles. A shift that made him a special attraction rather than a weekly storyline driver. Instead of working with main event talent, he was wrestling preliminary opponents in matches designed to get the crowd warmed up for bigger names. The change was pretty obvious to anyone watching WWF programming regularly. The shift to special attraction appearances rather than regular storylines really showed how Morris's status had changed. WWF would bring him back for specific shows or angles, but he wasn't part of the ongoing weekly television programming like he used to be. Morris became someone they called when they needed a familiar face for a particular segment, not someone they built storylines around. Newer, more athletic stars were getting the spotlight Morris once enjoyed. Performers who could combine personality with incredible athletic ability were taking over the television time and major feuds. Morris watched from the sidelines as wrestlers half his age got the opportunities he'd worked years to earn. These new guys weren't necessarily better storytellers or more charismatic. but they fit what WWF wanted for their future. Morris faced a difficult decision about his full-time wrestling future during this period. He could keep grinding it out in opening matches and occasional special appearances, hoping things might change back in his favor. Or he could accept that his time as a featured performer was ending and start planning for what came next. Morris wasn't getting any younger, and his body was feeling the effects of years of wrestling. Morris handled his reduced role with complete grace and professionalism, showing up when called and staying positive without backstage politics or bitter complaints. Other wrestlers in similar circumstances might have gotten bitter or caused locker room drama. Morris just kept being the same authentic, humble guy he'd always been. His response to adversity was just as genuine as his response to success had been years earlier. The guy who'd never pretended to be something he wasn't during his rise to fame wasn't going to start putting on an act during his decline either. Morris recognized when it was time to step back from full-time wrestling, showing the same authenticity that had made him famous in the first place. He could read the writing on the wall without getting angry about it. Morris chose to leave full-time wrestling on his own terms rather than become a parody of himself, a decision that showed his wisdom about the business and his own career. He understood that hanging around too long could damage the positive memories fans had of his character. Morris wanted to exit while people still remembered him fondly, rather than as someone who couldn't accept that his time had passed. Morris's graceful exit from featured status proved that his character wasn't just a wrestling gimmick. He really was the humble, down-to-earth person he'd portrayed on television. That authenticity served him well when making the transition away from wrestling's spotlight, just like it had served him when he first stepped into that spotlight years earlier. What Morris did next would surprise a lot of people who thought his career was over. After stepping back, Jim built a second career in local radio at WBCT and later hosted a nationally syndicated program on Sirius XM's Outlaw Country channel. He didn't vanish. He repurposed his genuine voice for radio, where his storytelling and Kentucky roots fit naturally. When Morris stepped back from full-time wrestling in the late 1980s, he didn't spend years trying to recapture his former glory like so many wrestlers do. He went back to Kentucky and started building a completely different career in radio broadcasting. The transition from wrestling to radio wasn't guaranteed to work, though. Wrestling fame doesn't automatically translate to success in other fields. Radio requires different skills than wrestling. You need to be entertaining for hours at a time using only your voice. Morris had to prove he could hold an audience's attention without the spectacle of wrestling matches or the visual appeal of his imposing physical presence. But Morris's authentic personality worked just as well on radio as it had in wrestling. His genuine Kentucky accent and down-to-earth stories connected with local listeners who appreciated his humble approach. Morris wasn't trying to be some slick radio personality. He was just being himself on the airwaves, which was exactly what had made him successful in wrestling. The guy who'd never put on airs as a wrestler wasn't about to start acting fake as a radio host. Morris's decision to return to his Kentucky roots rather than chase wrestling fame elsewhere showed his priorities. He could have moved to a bigger market and tried to leverage his wrestling celebrity for a higher-profile radio gig. Instead, Morris chose to stay close to home and serve the community where he'd grown up. This wasn't about maximizing his earning potential or staying in the spotlight. Morris wanted to be near family and friends in the place that had shaped him. The local radio work led to bigger opportunities down the line. His Sirius XM show became a long-running success, spanning over 15 years on the Outlaw Country channel, where his authentic rural background was a perfect fit for the programming. Country music fans appreciated having someone who genuinely understood their lifestyle hosting shows. Morris wasn't some city guy pretending to relate to country culture. He'd actually lived the experiences he talked about on air. Sirius XM gave Morris a national platform again, but in a completely different context than wrestling. His radio show reached fans across the country who connected with his stories about rural life and his genuine appreciation for country music. Morris had found his perfect audience fit in a medium that played to his conversational strengths. He could tell stories, interact with callers, and just be himself for hours at a time. WE periodically brought him back for nostalgia shows as beloved alumni rather than an active competitor. Morris was always welcomed back as respected wrestling history rather than some forgotten has-been. His positive reputation from his active wrestling years carried over into these reunion appearances. Keep in mind, Morris never demanded these comeback spots or tried to insert himself into current storylines. He graciously accepted invitations when they came and stayed out of the way when they didn't. Morris understood his role as a respected veteran who could add nostalgic value to special occasions without overshadowing current performers. His continued connection to the Kentucky community remained strong throughout his radio career. Morris stayed involved with local events and charities, using his name recognition to help causes he cared about. He never acted like he was too big for his hometown after achieving national fame. Morris kept the same relationships and values that had grounded him before wrestling success. Morris's philosophy about leaving the spotlight on his own terms proved wise. He walked away from wrestling while people still had positive memories of his career. Morris didn't hang around past his welcome or embarrass himself trying to compete with younger, more athletic performers. He recognized when his time as a featured wrestler was over and moved on gracefully. The transition from wrestling to radio proved that Morris's authentic personality could succeed in multiple fields. His genuine charm and natural storytelling ability weren't limited to professional wrestling. Morris showed that wrestlers didn't have to depend entirely on their ring careers for long-term success. He built a second career that suited his personality and kept him connected to fans in a different way. But he never lost what made him beloved, and that reputation followed him into his post-wrestling life. Morris's successful career change revealed something important about the character that had made him so special in wrestling. That authenticity wasn't just a wrestling character, it was who James Morris actually was as a person. In a business full of larger-than-life personas, the most remarkable thing about Hillbilly Jim was how real he actually was. Wrestling has always been built on characters who are exaggerated versions of reality or complete fabrications. Most wrestlers put on an act the moment they walk through the arena doors and don't drop it until they're back home. Morris was different though. The guy you saw on television was the same guy you met in the locker room or at the local diner after a show. Fellow wrestlers said he was the same off-camera. While other performers were constantly working angles or trying to protect their on-screen personas, Morris just treated everyone with the same respect and kindness he'd always shown. He wasn't calculating about his interactions or trying to get something from people. Morris approached wrestling relationships the same way he approached all relationships, honestly and directly. Keep in mind, professional wrestling creates a weird environment where nothing is quite what it seems. Wrestlers are supposed to hate each other on television but be friends backstage. Good guys and bad guys travel together and eat meals together between shows. Morris navigated this fake world by staying authentic to his actual personality rather than getting caught up in the performance aspects. The contrast between wrestling's manufactured drama and Morris's genuine personality was pretty obvious to anyone who spent time around him. While other wrestlers were always on and playing their characters, Morris would just sit and have normal conversations about farming, family, or whatever else was happening in his life. He didn't need to maintain some larger-than-life persona when the cameras weren't rolling. Andre the Giant respected him and treated him well. Andre was notoriously tough on wrestlers he didn't like, but he always treated Morris well. Morris approached Andre the same way he approached everyone else, with genuine respect and friendship. Andre appreciated that Morris never tried to use their relationship for personal gain or act differently around him because he was famous. Morris spent time signing autographs and talking to fans because he genuinely enjoyed meeting people. He never acted like fan interactions were a burden or something he had to get through quickly. Morris understood that fans made his career possible and treated them accordingly. He would often drive himself to wrestling shows instead of flying, which gave him opportunities to stop and talk with fans along the way. He'd eat at truck stops and local diners where regular people could approach him. He mentored younger wrestlers quietly without seeking credit for it. Morris would help new guys learn the ropes and understand the wrestling business without making a big show of his guidance. He shared his knowledge because he wanted to help people succeed, not because he wanted recognition as some great teacher or mentor. Young wrestlers often didn't realize how much Morris had helped them until years later. His approach to the wrestling business stayed professional without losing his humanity. Morris understood that wrestling was entertainment and treated it like a job, but he never became cynical about it. He maintained his enthusiasm for performing and connecting with audiences throughout his career. Morris found ways to be businesslike without becoming cold or calculating. Morris's authenticity was rare and valuable in wrestling because most performers felt pressure to create artificial personas. The wrestling business almost encourages people to become fake versions of themselves. Morris proved you could succeed by just being genuine and letting your real personality connect with audiences. He showed that authenticity could be more compelling than any manufactured character. The guy succeeded because he never tried to be anyone other than himself. Morris didn't study other wrestlers and try to copy their success formulas. He didn't reinvent himself when wrestling trends changed. Morris just stayed true to his Kentucky farm boy roots and let that genuine personality carry his career. His consistency was his greatest strength. His authenticity wasn't just a gimmick, it was the quality that earned him genuine affection inside and outside the business. That quality made him special during wrestling's transition into mainstream entertainment. James Morris represented something rare, a genuine rural face who helped carry wrestling into MTV-era mainstream attention without losing what made him authentic. His discovery by talent scouts, rise through genuine Kentucky charm, brief drift into cartoonish family expansion, and graceful exit tell the complete story of how real characters could succeed in wrestling's biggest era. Morris proved that being yourself could connect with audiences better than any manufactured persona. He wasn't the perfect wrestler, but he was the perfect example of what a character built on real life could accomplish in wrestling's mainstream breakthrough. If you grew up on these characters, hit like and tell us your Hillbilly Jim memory in the comments. Which non-athletic wrestling character do you think is underrated? Comment below, like and subscribe for 100 years of luck.